Hi everyone, welcome back to Minastic. We have completed design and architecture questions. Now let's start with communication questions in microservices. Now let's start with the communication questions like what are the different types of communication between microservices? So we can interact from one microservice to another microservice in different ways like synchronized way, asynchronized way, event driven gRPC and unary RPC. So let's go through each and every communication system and understand about this. Microservice can communicate using various mechanisms including synchronous, which is nothing but REST API which we use it, and asynchronous way, which is messaging queue communication like Kafka. Let's see what is synchronized blocking or synchronized communication. A request response pattern where one microservice sends a request to another and wait for the response. This kind of approach is used in simple microservice that communicate in the same network connection. For example, we are calling one microservice to another microservice using REST calls and REST templates. So this kind of communication is nothing but synchronization blocking or synchronization communication. Let's see what is asynchronous non-blocking or asynchronous communication. A client doesn't wait for the response before acting. For example, message queuing allows a service to send a message to another service, even if the other service isn't ready to receive it. In previous Kafka videos, I have designed two microservices connecting through Kafka mechanism. So one is a producer, the other one is a consumer. Producer produces the message to Kafka continuously, and receiver, which is nothing but consumer, will subscribe to particular topic and receives the message. So this kind of communication is called asynchronous communication. Now let's see what is event-driven communication. Microservices communicate by emitting and consuming events. So we design events and communicate microservices to each other. Let's see what is gRPC, a framework that uses protocol buffers to define and serialize messages and services. It supports multiple languages and platforms by versioning, and compatibility can be challenging as service and client involved. Let's see what is unary RPC. A client sends a single request to the server and receive a single response. This is similar to traditional synchronization function calls. So these are 5 different ways to communicate from one microservice to another microservice. Let's see the next question. What is API gateway and how does it work? In previous videos, we have designed API gateway where it was the entry point for the request which are sent by the client. So an API gateway service is a single entry point for all client requests, handling tasks such as authentication, load balance, and routing to the appropriate microservice. This helps to simplify the client service communication and provide a consistent interface for the application. Now let's answer to the next question. What is messaging queue and how is it used in microservice? Messaging queue is a popular asynchronous communication mechanism in microservice architecture. It allows services to communicate indirectly, decoupling the sender and receiver, and enable greater scalability and fault tolerance. Let's see what is asynchronous and asynchronous communication. Synchronized communication is when the caller sends a message and wait for the response from the receiver. Whereas in asynchronous communication, when the caller continues execute code without waiting for the response. So this is the main difference between synchronous and asynchronous communication. Let's see how do we handle service to service communication. We can handle service to service communication in microservice in 4 different ways, like service mesh, protocols, messaging brokers, HTTPs, and TLS. Service mesh, a software layer that handles service to service communication and moves responsibility away from the microservice. Protocol. Microservice can communicate using protocols like HTTP, gRPC, or messaging queue like RabbitMQ and Kafka. Message brokers. Message brokers like Apache Kafka, RabbitMQ, and Apache ActiveMQ facilities associate communication between microservice through messaging queue. This is good for scenarios where microservices need to exchange information without being tightly coupled. Let's see what is HTTPS and TLS. HTTPS is a secure version of HTTP which encrypt data between the client and the server, SSL or TLS certification. So these are 5 different questions can be asked in the interview in communication category of microservice.